This is Mehul Mankad, and I'm here with Alan Smith. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So Alan is with the Veteran Support Specialist Program and is going to be talking with us about culture and why it's important to veteran service officers. Alan, why is culture important?
Well, culture really is important. And when we look at culture, it's the sum total ways of living, including artifacts, behaviors, and a system of belief that's built up by a group of human beings. And it's transmitted from one generation to another, Mehul.
Okay.
And when we look at it, this is to say that culture is the glue that really bands or holds a group of human beings together. It's the way that, in essence, we self-identify or we shape our worldview. And culture is a huge part of what makes us, us.
Right, right. So being culturally competent is important.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, being culturally competent, it's a surefire way to improve our ability to communicate and connect with others. I mean, having a working understanding of cultural elements and values helps to create a strong client-provider alliance. It shows others that you're on the same team, or at least you understand their values.
Right, right. That seems really important when working with veterans in particular.
Oh, absolutely. That's for sure. It's especially important when working with veterans because veterans transitioning out of the military service, they're in the process of leaving a culture behind and really transitioning into a new one.
Right.
So when we look at that, I mean, it's exceptionally difficult endeavor. So it's important to find someone who really, they can share that burden. I mean, being culturally competent, we signal to a veteran that, you know, we are a teammate, we understand.
Right.
Veteran culture is one that can be highly exclusive. Veterans are often deeply indoctrinated into their culture, and many hold the belief that only veterans can truly understand them.
So Alan, what are the different elements that make up a culture?
Well, we can think of culture really as being comprised of 7 basic interconnected elements.
Okay.
So let's talk about those elements.
Great.
One would be a shared language. It's the cornerstone of culture and maybe the most obvious cultural element. It's really a way that people communicate, but more than that, it's the quickest way for members of the same culture to identify one another. So think about a situation when you've been in a large group of people you didn't know. Maybe when you went away to college, say in a new state, or joined the military.
You know, I went off to college at 18, 1,000 miles from home. And I get there, and most of the people there are from a different part of the country, and most of them sound a certain way. Mm-hmm. But then there were a couple of people that were from my part of the country, and I immediately kind of found them, even without trying.
Right. And I remember when I went off to college, I came from an Armenian American background.
Oh, wow.
And so I found that I would gravitate, in some regards, to the people that I knew that were kind of in my family circle, and I felt much more comfortable.
Yeah, yeah.
So definitely. Well, you know, when you heard someone with an accent, you know, people often do gravitate towards that person. But more than likely, I did, I know Mehul did, but the person with a similar accent was telling you that they shared at least a vision of your culture or possibly some of your values.
Right.
You know, the military is different. Each branch develops a unique way of speaking, really based on its job, its environment, and of course, its acronyms.
Absolutely. So people who are in the Navy know all those Navy acronyms. Yeah, they're hard to understand for me sometimes. And then people who are in different branches, they have their own language.
They do. And then when you transition, it's a totally different language in the civilian world.
That's a good point.
So, yeah. But so imagine you were on a military base, let's say, and you stopped to ask me for directions to a post office. Well, like we were just saying, it's seemingly a simple request unless we don't speak the same language.
Right.
And in that case, if my response was, well, you see the PX, go 2 clicks west of that, take a left at the 7-Day store, keep going down the main drag, and you'll see it between the commissary and the SATO office. Well, if you hit the ASP, you've gone too far. And that's not very helpful, is it?
Yeah, if you said that to me, I'm not going to get it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it feels like a secret code, and you have to be in the club to understand it, right? Well, not really. Once you're out of the military, veterans often use military language to connect with one another, but yet now you certainly don't have to speak Marine if you're an Army vet. But on top of that, it's important to know that a person is trying to find common ground when they communicate with you.
Right, right.
So let's look at another one. So we have artifacts, symbols, and rituals. Well, they go hand in hand with language and are where a culture puts its values and beliefs into tangible form. Artifacts and symbols carry a great deal of meaning in most cultures. They can be objects, gestures, sounds, images, really anything used to represent something else. I mean, in tribal cultures, it's usually a talisman or maybe a ceremonial outfit. The military is filled with symbols and rituals, from unit crests, medals, awards, to uniforms and ceremonies meant to signify change of command, often promotions or even commemorate past events.
So each branch has literally hundreds of different symbols that have special meaning.
They do, and they certainly mean something to everybody that's involved in that portion of the branch.
Right, right.
So when we look at artifacts, symbols, and rituals, they can be important to veterans transitioning out of the military, since they represent, again, pride. And there's pride in that member being a service member.
Right, right.
In fact, we'll talk about that a little bit, because I have a couple of artifacts and symbols with me today.
Oh, yeah.
And one thing I have is a Brothers in Arms Foundation bracelet.
Yeah.
And that has to do with the Marine Corps Special Operations Command that I'm involved in. And I also carry a dog tag with the names of several that have passed away in an event. So to me, it's personal. I really like to keep it with me at all times.
I imagine you're certainly not the only veteran that carries those symbols with them.
No, that's exactly right. All right, so let's look at history and traditions.
Sounds good.
So history and traditions are just that. The history that is passed from one generation to the next. This gives a culture a sense of place and belonging, as well as a context for cultural elements. When we look at that, the military does an impressive job of teaching new members its history. But not only are service members required to learn history and traditions, pretty much from their respective units, but often they see that their history in everyday forms, really from statues, monuments, streets, facilities, named for Medal of Honor winners, historic battles. For those who have visited Fort Benning, Georgia, you may be familiar with the Audie Murphy Gym, or the Murph. Well, it's named for a Medal of Honor recipient, Audie Murphy. You know, every morning on Fort Bragg, the paratroopers of the 82nd Airborne Division run down Ardennes Street.
Okay.
Well, it's named to commemorate the 82nd's effort in the Ardennes Forest in World War II. This is a way to create a living history for service members. Another one is play, recreation, and art.
Okay.
A culture really expresses itself in a way it has fun. Many military recreational activities are centered around stress relief and really blowing off steam. So this seems innocuous, but it tells us a great deal about military culture. It says that the military lifestyle is high stress, but it has an emphasis on performance and detail. You know, we often don't realize, but the fact that a group of people really enjoy similar activities is proof that they are deeply indoctrinated into that culture.
Right.
So further, recreation is also a way to reinforce our cultural values. And really, it teaches members what's important. Certain sports may teach teamwork and tenacity.
So the way you put it, it sounds like recreation could be a part of a unit's culture, and that maybe certain units blow off steam a different way than others.
Oh, absolutely. And I know from a Marine Corps background that, you know, we like to be very physical in blowing off our steam, whether it's running or, you know, or wrestling.
Right.
So
right.
definitely.
Okay, cool.
So let's look at another one.
Okay.
Organization, structure, and hierarchy. Our culture's way of shaping itself to provide for the common needs, keep order, and protect itself from outside threats. So this dictates who holds power in a society, how decisions are made, and really how people interact. So the military has a very definable organization and hierarchy.
Right.
So think about the roles of officers and enlisted personnel.
Okay.
The two live very different lives.
Right.
In fact, enlisted service members are required to salute officers and stand up when an officer walks into a room. This is a very clear way of indicating that officers are meant to be leaders. So the structure and hierarchy of the military treats them as such. So a great deal of a culture's organization, structure, and hierarchy is tied into the next cultural element. Let's look at mission, goals, and shared worldview.
Sounds good.
In the terms of military, it's easy, relatively easy, to understand each branch or unit's missions and goals. Each branch has a clearly stated mission that guides its existence. Similarly, units with those branches have their own missions, generally based on capabilities. So a Marine reconnaissance unit will differ from a Marine air unit. A Navy shipboarding unit will certainly differ from a submarine unit. But what is much more difficult to discern is a culture's worldview. This refers to the manner in which a culture sees and expresses itself in relation to the world around it. So because by design, a culture bands together and goes through certain experiences together, it develops a shared worldview. From this worldview, it develops beliefs, values, and behaviors. So the way a soldier sees the world is likely very different than a civilian due to their experiences and, again, their culture.
Sure.
So the interesting thing is that given their different environments, in the end, both are right. Let's look at ethics and values.
Okay.
All right. Often hard to express, the military articulates its value by listing them and repeating them like a mantra. We see this in the fact that each branch of the military publishes its values and creeds. It requires its members to learn and memorize them. Boy, that's for sure. But another type of ethical teaching happens in the way service members interact towards one another and the way that they view their purpose. So this is an unspoken ethical code that service members really learn by living. So it's very evident in the way that they show initiative in carrying out the tasks that they do on a daily basis, helping out their comrades or sacrificing personal luxuries, really for the greater good.
Right.
So let's take a moment to explore great examples of cultural ethics.
Okay.
So one of those, the warrior ethos. Well, the warrior ethos reads, I will always place the mission first. I will never accept defeat. I will never quit, and I will never leave a fallen comrade. So while it seems simple, this is a central guiding principle by which service members live. It permeates the military lifestyle and helps codify the military's ethical code.
So what's interesting about these 7 different elements is that some of them are kind of obvious and you can see them. And then others you gotta have to dig and really understand what you're doing to get them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You know, it's the cultural iceberg.
All right, you're gonna have to explain that one to me. What's the cultural iceberg?
Most definitely. Often we use an analogy of an iceberg to describe culture. You know, parts of it are visible above the water, but also the vast majority are not visible. They're below the waterline.
Okay.
So it's out of view. We can say that 7 cultural elements all really fit onto this iceberg.
Some of them you can see, some are a little bit lower, and then some are really deep.
Absolutely right, most definitely. The visible elements are the ones that are easily noticeable. It's what we see through casual observations, like soldiers in formation, war monuments, even saluting or uniforms. I mean, these are the artifacts and symbols, and sometimes history and traditions, that may be obvious, but they are the conduits to a deeper level of culture.
Got it, got it.
Now, applied culture is the stuff at the waterline.
Okay.
So they require a deeper understanding, really a knowing where to look. So this is where we find stuff like shared language, organization, structure and hierarchy, or even play, recreation, and art. You know, the hidden elements require a deep, thorough understanding of culture. And this often requires membership in a culture or even at least a long-term study. The deeper cultural elements can even be difficult for members of a culture to describe. This is where we find the shared worldview and ethics and values.
So I think for people who aren't in the military or who were in one branch and not in another, you know, it's easy to pick on Marines, right? It's sometimes hard to define what it means to be a Marine, but a Marine knows it.
Absolutely right.
They can feel it.
Sure.
But it's hidden.
Yes, it is.
And it may be hard to explain to someone who's not a Marine.
That's true.
And so maybe working as a veteran service officer is something that we need to be sensitive to and respect, even if we didn't have the privilege of being a Marine.
Exactly. And every branch has its esprit de corps and their pride.
Yeah.
And to try to explain the pride of a Marine is difficult at times.
Yeah. So that's part, I guess that's what you're saying is the hidden part of this cultural iceberg.
Oh, 100%.
Okay,
That's
cool.
true.
Okay, I'm starting to get it.
Oh, yeah.
So Alan, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about indoctrination. Why would that be important to the military?
You have to think that indoctrination may be a culture's most important survival tool. So it's where new members and generations learn to carry on the traditions and values of a culture, as well as where they find value in being a part of that culture.
So when someone, let's say, turns 18 and joins a branch of the military, they didn't, even if they grew up in a military family, they weren't part of that branch until they came in. So they've got to learn the culture somehow.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where indoctrination might come in.
Absolutely right. So tests of masculinity in tribal cultures put young boys through tough and painful ordeals. I mean, hazing rituals in colleges, universities, and fraternities often involve pain and humiliation.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
I didn't think you would.
No.
So rites of passage usually involve ritual activities and teachings designed to strip individuals of their original roles and prepare them for new ones.
Got it.
The severity of an initiation ceremony significantly heightens newcomers' commitment to a group. For cultures that want to create a lasting sense of solidarity and distinction, the hardships of initiation activities provides a valuable advantage that they will not easily give up. The military is famous, sometimes infamous, for its indoctrination process. It's one that's probably the most effective in the world.
You know, as you've been talking about this, even though I'm not a veteran, I've spent my career working with veterans, I'm thinking that they're all thinking back to their time in basic.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, and not always a good time, but it's a very memorable time.
And it is this time where you're essentially leaving your civilian personality behind and becoming. Mm-hmm. What you're becoming, you may not have realized, but you're becoming.
You are becoming. That's exactly right. Yeah. So, and that's why the indoctrination process works so well. I mean, we're dealing with a simple value proposition. I mean, people who go through a great deal of trouble or pain to attain something, well, they tend to value it more highly than those who attain pretty much the same thing with minimal effort.
Right.
When someone looks at an object or a status they have obtained, they see it not only for just being an object, but the effort that they expended to achieve it means so much more to them.
So when the person gets their airborne wings, it's not just a piece of metal.
No,
it's
absolutely right.
all the work that went into getting the airborne wings.
Yep, it's the reward for the achievement.
Right.
So absolutely. They become acutely aware of its value. And so it stands to reason that a military service member who expends a great deal of time and energy and endures really considerable amount of physical and emotional pain, again, in basic training, in boot camp, or perhaps later, that training event, let's say such as a special operations school, where they jealously guard the status they have attained, because again, to them, it's extremely valuable. They've worked hard and they've earned that.
Right. So let's talk a bit about military culture in particular. Can you describe some of the unique characteristics of military culture? Sure.
We can think of the military really as a superculture. It's a melting pot of individuals with widely varying backgrounds. I mean, with a preset framework of really values and hierarchy. So our service members come from a wide range of backgrounds, some rural, some urban, some suburban, and most certainly different levels of family income or their own values. These members bring all of their cultural background with them when they join. So let's say a recruit from rural Iowa gets lumped in with one from Brooklyn, one from North Carolina, or every other corner of the U.S. So through the indoctrination process and through life, I mean, the military overlays a preset culture really complete with new values, ethics, worldview, and all the elements of culture. So this certainly makes for an interesting study of sociology. Sometimes these cultures clash, but by and large, the individual assimilates really into their new military lifestyle.
So it sounds like what you're describing is that you take a bunch of people on day zero of basic, and they all bring different things to the table.
Right.
But then by the time they finish, they are all indoctrinated and part of this new culture. I imagine that there's room, however, for cultures within the military to continue to clash and not get along. And I've heard this term subculture. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about subcultures in the military.
Sure, absolutely. Well, when we look at subcultures, I mean, they're the values and norms distinct from those of the majority. I mean, they are held by a smaller group really within a wider society. So in the United States, for instance, subcultures might be hippies, goths, fans of hip hop, heavy metal,
right,
even bikers.
Okay.
The examples are endless. The military is almost designed to create divisions that naturally develop their own subcultures. But broadly speaking, there are really 5 ways that military culture describes itself, and let's talk about those.
That sounds good.
Let's look at 1, So the first branch of service. As we discussed earlier, each branch has its own unique mission and identity. So an airman carries a different culture, let's say, than a Marine.
Yet they're both veterans.
Correct.
Is kind of what you're saying.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly right. So second, since military units tend to specialize on one capability or build their identity around a distinction, inevitably, service members tend to build up some pretty much healthy bravado around their unit. We call that pride really esprit de corps.
Right, right.
So even though they are the same branch, Army airborne units hold a slightly different culture than, say, an air assault unit.
Okay.
So job or MOS. So it's a natural extension of unit division. You might hear a soldier say that they are the tip of the spear, and a logistician remind them that, well, bullets don't fly without supply.
Right, right, right.
Next, let's look at rank. So since commissioned, non-commissioned, and enlisted personnel really serve different roles, they will naturally create their own subculture. In fact, the military takes it one step further and specifically prohibits fraternization between them. I mean, they live in separate housing and really two separate lives.
Right.
So lastly, we come to generation. So this is more of a veteran-related subdivision, but it bears mentioning because the changing nature of national threats, the military, it essentially reinvents itself every couple of decades. So let's think of uniform changes, equipment changes, and with it, so do the attitudes and the worldview of our service members. You know, the pre-9/11 military culture, well, that's certainly different than our culture that we have today.
So this sounds pretty complicated, but it absolutely respects the experience that each individual veteran went through, right? So it's not just that somebody is a veteran. It might be more helpful for someone working with them to ask a few questions and understand that, okay, this is a Vietnam-era Marine who was in the infantry, who enlisted and was not drafted, and served 2 tours.
Right.
Like that has much more depth and meaning and can help you understand where that person's coming from than just to say one more veteran for me to see or take care of.
Oh, that's absolutely right.
Okay, so veterans come with this very complex culture, and when they separate from active duty and become veterans, they're leaving with that culture and bringing it with them into the civilian world. Could you tell us a little bit about culture clash between being active duty and then becoming a new veteran?
There sure is. Much of the difference comes really in base culture values. It's collectivism versus individualistic culture. So the military generally is accepted as a collectivist culture, if you will.
Okay.
So simply meaning that each person is encouraged to be an active player in society, to do what is best for society as a whole rather than just themselves.
The unit comes before the individual.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah, so the rights of families, communities, and the collective are considered greater than those of the individual.
And that's part of their indoctrination.
Oh, absolutely. So the rules of a collective culture promote unity, brother and sisterhood, and selflessness. Working with others and cooperating is the norm. Everyone supports each other as a community, a family, or a nation. I mean, more than as an individual.
Right, right, right.
So for this reason, it can be difficult for veterans to make the shift into a different culture. You may hear a veteran say that, they're unable to describe their individual achievements really in a job interview. Or, for that matter, they're uncomfortable working as an individual rather than as part of a team. And I know I certainly fall into that on a regular basis. This is a reflection of a collective culture at work.
You made an interesting point that veterans may have difficulty when they separate taking credit for the work that they did because they've been indoctrinated to view it as work of their unit.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a real change from how civilians interact with each other, where they're taking credit for everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very true. So, well, especially, let's look in the U.S.
Right.
I mean, a civilian society is much more, again, of an individualist culture.
Me, me, me.
All about me. Yeah. Absolutely. What's in it for me?
Right.
So, an individualistic culture, you have an I or a me identity. Individual rights are seen as being the most important. Rules attempt to ensure self-importance and individualism. Independence is valued. There is much less of a drive to help other citizens or communities than in collectivism. Relying or being dependent on others is frequently seen as undesirable. People are encouraged to do things on their own. To rely on themselves, people strive for their own successes. So we see this in the American dream ideal. So it's where an individual works hard without assistance from others and achieves that individual success.
Right.
So in an American, say, civilian culture, we tend to glorify those who have achieved really singular success.
Okay. It seems like with all of these cultural subdivisions, there's this chance to introduce bias.
So absolutely. There's a tribal nature of the military that often encourages members to be competitive with one another. This is a great way to build esprit de corps, but often results in misconceptions and stereotypes, really about the lives and attitudes of other service members. So with VSOs should take the time. And again, VSOs take the time to think about their own military experience, how their perceptions and their culture differs from others. Understand the different stereotypes that you'll encounter. Don't naturally assume that every Air Force vet is quiet and analytical, or that every Marine vet is angry.
So Alan, how are VSOs going to use this very useful information you shared with us today?
Well, it's important to recognize and appreciate culture, but you don't have to know everything about every subculture in the military in order to connect with a veteran.
That's a relief.
It is, absolutely. The important thing is to recognize when something is culturally important to that veteran and then make an effort to understand it and why it's important. So we can call it culturally sensitive inquiry,
Okay.
for instance.
Okay.
So that means recognizing when you are dealing with an element of a culture and making an effort to understand what it means to that person. So this builds better communication and trust, and really a strong client-provider alliance so that you, the VSS, can connect with your veteran and better understand their needs.
Alan, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you all for having me.